Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Technology, a podcast exploring the latest in computers, networking, home automation, mobile computing, and all things technology related. Our hosts will take a deeper dive into the latest and greatest in tech trends and give you the information you need to enable your tech-centric world.
This is Insights into Technology, Episode 7, Fake Fines and Real Risks. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and this is the tech news for this week. Our first article comes to us from BBC News, from Russia with love and a $20 undecillion fine. In an extraordinary move, a Russian court has fined Google an unfathomable 20 undecillion rubles, equivalent to a mind-boggling 20 followed by 33 zeros in dollars. The fine dwarfs Google's own worth of around $2 trillion and even surpasses the world's entire GDP, which sits at $110 trillion. The penalty, as reported by Russian media, is linked to Google's restriction on Russian state media on YouTube, a stance that intensified after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which led to widespread Western sanctions and an exodus of companies from Russia. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who reportedly couldn't even pronounce the astronomical number, urged Google to address the matter. The fine illustrates a deepening clash between Moscow and the tech giant, following years of accusations from Russian authorities that Google promotes content banned in Russia and restricts access to state media outlets. While Google has largely pulled out of Russia, its services are not entirely banned, keeping it in an uneasy standoff with Russian authorities. So this is either someone who doesn't understand how finances work, or someone who was just really desperate to try to get into the headlines. The amount of money that they're calling for in this fine is literally more money than the entire world by orders of magnitude. It's financially impossible to pay this kind of penalty. Are you making a political statement here, or you just have some kind of fetish for being Dr. Evil from Austin Powers or something? I'm really confused by this. This also shows or demonstrates the evolving landscape of content moderation and sovereign internet policies. And it's another blow against the internet, really. What this does is it silos Russia off even more than they already were previously. And the internet itself, as everyone knows, is designed to be an open, collaborative medium for people to have information, have exchange, socialize, do commerce, various things. And anytime you have a sovereign nation like this, China is famous for its Great Firewall of China. Russia has been famous for its fabled internet switch, where it can take itself off the internet at any time if they feel there's a need to do so in the government. What you're doing here is you're basically breaking the internet with politics, and that's unfortunate. It also draws into, conversely, on the other side, operational ethical implications of big technology. Because the internet is global and these major corporations that operate on the internet and are really the essence of the internet itself, there's no centralized regulation, obviously, of the internet. So as a result, you have these regionalized disputes that you run into in which, in this case here, the Russian authorities may have a legitimate complaint about some of the business practices of YouTube and Google that may pose censorship, which, ironically enough, Russia's trying to exert its power so it can have its own censorship. So this conflict comes into play regionally here when it's almost like trying to regulate air, or the environment. The environment's another great example, where all entities, all countries, all people in the world rely on these things, the internet, and obviously are affected by the environment. But there's no international coalition. There's no international law that governs these global entities that affect countries. So as a result, you wind up getting laws passed regionally, and those laws aren't necessarily in the best interest of, in this case, the internet or Google. It's certainly not in the best interest of the users of the internet. It's almost invariably going to be in the best interest of whatever government entity is legislating these laws into play. So you have this ripple effect that comes into play where, in this case, Western tech firms are increasingly forced to comply with not just local laws, but these complex geopolitical alignments. And not to say that it's happened in this case here, but you could certainly see the federal government placing pressure on a U.S.-based company to comply with other nations in the interest of international cooperation. So the waters get muddied very quickly. I think the only thing we probably can conclude from this is that we have a very uncertain future for U.S.-based tech companies in Russia and China and other adversarial countries, which, it's going to make it very difficult to do business, but the impact on users is going to be profound as well. And we haven't seen the last shoe drop on this one. Next up, we have an article from InfoSecurity magazine. Disinformation Nation, Trolls, Tech, and the Truths. U.S. government agencies have attributed a fake video of Haitians allegedly voting illegally in Georgia to Russian actors, stating it's part of a Kremlin-backed campaign to undermine the legitimacy of the 2024 presidential election, which at the time of this recording has already been determined in the favor of Donald Trump. The video, widely shared on social media, falsely shows men claiming to be Haitian citizens voting multiple times in Georgia and encouraging others to do the same. Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, dismissed the video as a disinformation effort likely produced by Russian troll farms and called for its removal from platforms like X. The U.S. officials at the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, noted that this tactic reflects broader foreign influence efforts aimed at stoking division among American voters. This incident is part of a surge in foreign interference, with the U.S. intelligence community also citing another disinformation tactics, including a video falsely suggesting that Kamala Harris took a bribe. Such influence operations have ramped up in recent months, with Microsoft and the Department of Justice identifying cyber campaigns from Iran and Russia, respectively, targeting the U.S. election. Now, the election's already determined, so there's no point in getting into a lot of the debate about this. However, it is worth mentioning that every time we see one of these foreign entities interfering with the U.S. election, it happened, obviously, this year. It happened in the 2020 election. And there's evidence to suggest that it happened in 2016 as well. all of these foreign entities, which are classified politely as adversarial nations, seem to be doing things that would be perceived as in the favor or to the advantage of Donald Trump. Now, we have clear proof that it's happened here. There's been disputed proof that it's happened in the past. I think it's a disturbing trend from a security standpoint, obviously. It tells us that we need to have heightened security demands for all of our enterprise IT and for our government entities anytime that we have an important thing like an election. It also makes us call into question the role of AI in detecting and combating disinformation. A lot of the stuff comes through, obviously made with props and not on location and basically works of fiction. But determining that it is a work of fiction seems to be the difficult part here. And more we're relying on AI, which, as we spoke of in previous podcasts, AI is being used to generate these campaigns as well. So it's almost like the machines fighting the machines in this case here. There's also the matter of data integrity and trust as enterprise priorities. As false information circulates more widely, maintaining data integrity and public trust becomes paramount. Financial institutions, healthcare providers, and large enterprises, securing data and ensuring its accuracy is crucial. Enterprises face increased pressure to validate the sources and authenticity of their data, especially if targeted by similar disinformation campaigns. And that is something that we do not hold that same standard to social media. More and more people lean on social media for their news. The whole idea, this whole premise of fake news that's been thrown out there to discredit reputable journalists and reputable media outlets that have journalistic standards and have to abide by regulation and federal laws. The idea that we're going to throw all that out the window and instead rely on influencers who post on X is terrifying, because none of those people have any kind of obligation to vet their sources or make sure what they're posting is true. And the platforms themselves all largely have immunity from anything that's posted as a platform. But you see on X, since the takeover by Elon Musk, their standards, their editorial standards, their ethics standards have, I would say, diminished or dropped off. But I mean, let's face it, they literally threw them out the window. They did away with their ethics boards. They did away with their review boards. And your influencers have no reason to vet their information, and your platforms now have no incentive whatsoever to curtail any misinformation. And these platforms are becoming the primary source of news. And while that plays well for the people who are manipulating the influencers, for a nation in general, I think it's a bad thing. It's dangerous, and it's something that's going to come back and bite us later on. The other thing that we have to keep in mind here is vendor and supply chain vulnerabilities that occur. We've seen this with man-in-the-middle attacks in the past, and supply chain vulnerabilities are still a significant threat to all of us, since many companies rely on third-party vendors for cloud services and data management. They must assess these partners' security measures against disinformation risks, which is one of the reasons why you see a lot of companies pulling their official presence off of disreputable social media sites like X. You never saw the uptake of anything other than right-leaning organizations on Truth Social and so forth. So your social media has become politicized to the point that it's almost a propaganda wing. And that's, in addition to our ridiculous fines that governments are imposing, that's a dark mark against the internet and making it dangerous. Now, we'll see how far that goes. Obviously, it's not going to be an issue at this point, since the election itself has been taken care of or resolved. I don't know if they're going to investigate this. Anyone's going to pursue this any further since Donald Trump won. I doubt it. I think there's probably a case there that's at least worth shedding some light on moving forward. This next article comes to us from Security Affairs, Password Sprays and Proxy Plays. Chinese threat actors are using the Quad 7 botnet, also known as Covert Network 1658, to carry out password spray attacks targeting Microsoft 365 accounts and various network devices. First detected in 2023, Quad 7 botnet compromises multiple Soho devices, including TP-Link, Zyxel, and Netgear, exploiting known and new vulnerabilities to perform brute force attacks. Notably, Microsoft has linked these attacks to Storm 940, a Chinese threat group active since 2021, which focuses on sectors such as government, defense, and NGOs across North America and Europe. Quad 7 uses thousands of compromised routers and devices as proxy nodes to relay low-volume, high-target password spray attempts, making it difficult to detect. The botnet's operators leverage rotating IP pools, with some IPs active for only about 90 days, avoiding typical security triggers for multiple failed logins. Microsoft has advised organizations to strengthen credential security and harden cloud identities to counter these threats, as Storm 940 persists in targeting credentials and establishing footholds in high-value environments for potential data exfiltration and further network exploitation. So this is a problem that we've been dealing with for over a decade now. Your Soho devices that are exploited by botnets, and these Soho devices typically are edge routers, cameras, light bulbs, your personal assistants, pretty much anything that's connected to the network. In this case here, they're exploiting a couple of known ones from TP-Link, Zyxel, and Netgear, but the threats have been out there for quite some time. This poses a significant threat to home office security, as well as commercial and enterprises, as these devices often lack robust security measures, especially in smaller businesses that may not regularly update or secure them. Storm 0940 in targeted sectors, a national security concern. Microsoft's link between Quad 7 and the Chinese threat group emphasizes how state-sponsored attackers are targeting sectors with sensitive data like government, defense, and NGOs. Now, this is a sector that I happen to live in quite frequently all day long. So the concerns about the threat to national security are significant. Raises questions about the steps organizations in these sectors need to take to protect their networks and why they're frequent targets of cyber espionage. There are platforms out there. There are cybersecurity platforms out there. NIST 800-171, 853, ISO 9002, I think it is. There's a lot of defined guidelines out there for how you should manage your network. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to stop every threat that's out there, but I think you have to have that fundamental baseline in place before you can start looking at one-off exploits like this But in that case, these platforms all have provisions in there for regular patching and testing and penetration testing and so forth, where these types of vulnerabilities would be caught and resolved. Now, this particular exploit is what's known as a low-volume password spray. Typically, what happens in brute force attacks is you'll have a device or a bunch of devices that are targeting, say, a router, for instance, and they'll brute force it by overwhelming it with login attempts. And eventually, they'll usually get through, they'll gain some level of administrative access, and that little foothold they get in the door allows them to exploit further bugs that are in the firmware or software, or just do account takeovers or man in the middle, or, just start exfiltrating data. Now, those types of mass login failures throw up red flags like crazy in log analyzers. Alien Vault and so forth would pick something like this up fairly quickly, raise a flag. Most of them will automatically implement some type of preventative measure. If it happens to be a Windows domain, group policies will prevent a certain number of lockouts. They'll disable the account for a period of time. All kinds of mitigations happen when you have these large scale brute force. With these low volume ones, they slip through the cracks very easily because they're not setting off any flags. You don't want to set your tolerances to the point that you're even going to pick these things up, because on a regular basis, people mistype a password when they're logging into these devices, and you don't want to generate an excessive number of false flags. So the technique of using low volume password sprays will hopefully get by a lot of those mitigating circumstances that you have. This also brings up the challenges of tracking and mitigating distributed botnets. There have been dozens of botnets that have risen in the last 10 years and been taken down. There are hundreds more than that are in existence already, some of them are even cooperative between each botnet. Some of them have enough intelligence built into them so that they'll go dark for periods of time, and then they'll come back online to try to avoid detection. The level of intelligence in the botnets is increasing significantly, and that's largely to do with the hardware. A lot of the hardware that's out there from a consumer standpoint now, which tends to be the target for these exploits, that technology has increased significantly in computational power, memory capacity, bandwidth utilization. So the more sophisticated that newer technology gets, the more effective it is in these botnets. And, we'll remind everyone to keep in mind their password hygiene. Make sure you're using strong passwords, you're rotating your passwords, you're using password managers so that you're not reusing passwords. And make sure you're using your multi-factor authentication, especially when it has to do with cloud identities. Make sure you're using, at a minimum, an SMS second message. But you can use passcode, you can use Authenticator app, you can use YubiKeys. We just implemented YubiKeys for two-factor authentication at my office. There's a lot of options out there. If we only use passwords and we never change the defaults, we're in a lot of trouble. That was all we had for the first segment here. Before we go, I do want to take a moment to invite the listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find all of our podcasts, video and audio, listed as Insights into Things. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, TuneIn, anywhere you can get a podcast these days. We'd also love to get your feedback. Tell us how we're doing. Give us suggestions for show notes. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can also call in, leave us a voicemail if you'd like to appear on the show. We can get you on the show. That is 856-403-8788. 856-403-8788. Again, we are a family-friendly network, so please keep that in mind with any comments that you have. We may edit those comments for clarity and appropriateness of time. So keep that in mind as well. Feel free to get, again, the number is 856-403-8788, or you can get links to all that and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. And we'll be right back.
Are you tired of your favorite gaming podcast finishing with a play?
Oh, no!
Well, check out No Credits Rolled, where we play the games but rarely finish them. How's it going, folks? I'm Sam Whalen, your friendly host at No Credits Rolled, the ultimate gaming podcast, where we dish out the latest scoops and reviews on all your beloved video games.
Hey, listen!
Not only that, but we spice things up with some guest interviews and even give you, yes, you, a chance to have your say. Tune in every other week for a fresh dose of No Credits Rolled, available on all major podcast platforms, and hit us up on social media at No Credits Rolled. So why wait? Let's dive into the gaming world together, where finishing games is optional, but the fun is guaranteed.
Welcome back to Insights into Technology. Our next article comes to us from The Verge. Timeline tensions. Why Microsoft's screenshot saga isn't over yet. Microsoft has again postponed the release of its recall feature, initially intended for October, now pushed to December for Windows Insiders on Copilot Plus PCs. Recall is designed to capture screenshots of almost everything a user does on their PC, creating a searchable timeline, but security concerns have caused multiple delays. Microsoft has emphasized recall is an optional, fully removable feature, with extra time being taken to ensure a secure and trusted experience by strengthening encryption and making access contingent on Windows Hello authentication. The delay comes amid public concerns and misinformation, which escalated when some users found recall references in the latest Windows 11 update, sparking fears about forced installations. Microsoft's focus remains on resolving these issues and addressing bugs from recall's initial suspension. When this was first announced, and even to this day, I still say this is a very interesting feature that nobody wanted, nobody asked for, and I think nobody trusts at this point in time. The whole privacy concern here with everything being screenshotted and then ingested into an AI-driven database so that you can go back and look at it later. I'm not sure what need this was supposed to fill. I really don't. This to me sounds like a request from the government almost in their ability to try to track people's activities. I can't imagine Microsoft felt there was a need for this. I don't think they know what the purpose of this is going to be. And as such, they don't know how to secure it. Now, they've made a number of changes to it. Your opt-in ability, which I think kind of was a no-brainer. The fact that they were turning it on by default initially was terrifying. But they're trying to come up with a balance between productivity and privacy here, but I don't know what the productivity is from a tool like this. All I see are a whole bunch of privacy concerns at this point in time, and who has access to that data? Microsoft has proven to be notoriously insecure, despite their public efforts at trying to get better at security. They're literally the least secure operating system, and they have been I mean, they've had products that have been so bad. Internet Explorer is a great example that it had to be taken off the market. It was so insecure. It was so insecure that they stopped putting prizes up for it at Black Hat and DEF CON. I see Microsoft Recall. Who's tested this? What kind of privacy audits has this gone through? What kind of security audits? What kind of third-party review has this gone through? Is this just an internal project that somebody came up with? The impacts on the future of computing and the idea of digital timelines. I don't need a Wayback Machine for my computer. If I do something on my computer and I need to go back and redo it, that's what I have a backup system for. I don't need the computer spying on me and taking screenshots. So they can continue to delay this as far as I'm concerned. It's a feature that I don't think I'll ever want to use, nor do I even want to run the risk of having it on a computer that I own. Because Lord knows there's going to be some kind of exploit that's going to turn it on without my knowledge, and someone's going to start gathering data. That's the biggest fear out there. So thank you, but no thank you, Microsoft, on this one. One of China's most popular apps has the ability to spy on its users, and it's not the one that you're probably thinking. This article comes to us from CNN. CNN investigation has uncovered that Pinduoduo, one of China's top e-commerce apps, contains sophisticated malware, allowing it to bypass phone security, monitor users' activity, and even control settings. What could possibly go wrong? Cybersecurity experts and former Pinduoduo employees allege that the app exploits vulnerabilities in the Android systems, using these tactics to spy on users and potentially gain an edge over competitors. I guess you would with all that information. Researchers also found that the app uses privileged escalation, enabling it to access private data without consent and resist deletion. This revelation has raised significant concerns, especially given the rising scrutiny of Chinese apps like TikTok for similar privacy issues. The findings may impact the global reputation of Pinduoduo's international counterpart, Temu, or Temu, we call it Temu, which is currently expanding rapidly in Western markets. The Chinese government has previously enacted privacy regulations to curb data exploitation by domestic tech giants, but experts suggest these safeguards may have failed in Pinduoduo's case. And really, are you going to trust the Chinese government to protect foreigners from their own tech giants snooping? That's not the first people I'd put my trust in. As Pinduoduo disbanded the team responsible for developing these exploits, questions remain about the app's integrity and the oversight challenges facing Chinese regulators. So this draws into question the concern about enterprise security when it comes to consumer apps in the enterprise. It's very difficult to keep private apps or private devices like cell phones and so forth off your corporate network without fairly draconian efforts. A discovery of malware on these types of devices in this case, it was literally built into the software. It's difficult to prevent these things from getting into your network and finding exploits. The discovery of malware within a mainstream e-commerce app like Pinduoduo signals potential risks for companies with employees who use personal devices, especially in a bring-your-own-device environment. If employees have apps that exploit phone vulnerabilities, it could open backdoors into corporate systems. The risk of privilege escalation, whether it's a private device or a company device. Private escalation, which Pinduoduo allegedly uses to access and control private data without consent, is typically a tactic associated with cyber attacks rather than mainstream apps. That's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, at no point in time should an app be engaging in privilege escalation, asking for access to components on your phone that it doesn't need. People need to not just okay these things. It's like going to a website that's giving you a cookie warning and everyone just says okay to the cookies and takes them. Or you install a piece of software and you get the end user license agreement. Nobody ever reads any of these things. People are blindly giving permissions. They're, in many cases, you're being asked for it and giving it away. The impact on global business trust and regulatory pressures. We're seeing this in the United States, where you've got a large population of politicians who are interested in banning applications like TikTok because they think because it's potentially controlled by an adversarial government, they think that it is a danger to national security. Let's ignore the fact that you've got a number of domestic applications or domestic providers like Meta, for instance, who have been proven to be threats to our election systems and our government, but we don't do anything about them. So let's not be too hypocritical here. And again, we go back to the whole idea of cross-border applications, cross-border services, regional regulations. China says they're coming up with laws to govern these things, but those laws are not going to be to the benefit of anyone outside of China. We kind of have to understand that. And finally, the other thing that we really have to take, we kind of scratch the surface on, that we have to take into consideration is the bring your own device policy changes. CMMC 2.0 and a number of other more modern security frameworks have very strict handling of BYOD, how they are allowed on your network, what portion of the network they're allowed onto, how they have to authenticate. So again, it's one of these, you need to have that framework in place. You need to have the foundational security in place before you can try to mitigate any of these things. So we'll see how that one plays out. This next article comes to us from Security Week. And again, it's Google in the news once more. Google claims first vulnerability found using AI. The machines are policing the machines now. Google's Big Sleep, a new large language model agent developed in collaboration with Project Zero and DeepMind, has achieved a cybersecurity milestone by identifying a real-world vulnerability in SQLite, a popular open-source database engine. Unlike traditional fuzzing, which failed to detect the flaw even after 150 CPU hours, Big Sleep pinpointed a stack-based buffer overflow by analyzing recent code commits, guided by prior vulnerability data. The issue was patched swiftly before any user risk, highlighting Big Sleep's potential to advance security research. Google cautions, however, that while promising, LLM-based vulnerability discovery remains experimental and is currently complementary to existing methods. This big breakthrough underscores a broader industry trend as AI tools increasingly assist cybersecurity efforts, from spotting vulnerabilities to tracking exploitation attempts in real time. So the interesting thing here is how LLMs are revolutionizing vulnerability detection beyond traditional tools. One thing that LLMs are very good at doing is analyzing large chunks of data. If you've ever been part of a security audit or had evidence to sort through of exploitation on your network, you'll understand that going through router logs, firewall logs, system logs, system event viewer logs. It's depending on what level you're logging at, mind you, because if you're not logging at a high enough level, it doesn't matter what you go through. But depending on how high a level you're logging at, it can be a painful and agonizingly long process that is just ripe for human error to overlook something. Sometimes it's a single line entry in the log that you're looking for of a port that was accessed or an IP address that was unfamiliar or a login attempt that wasn't, that was too quick and it wasn't humanly possible to try to log in that fast. There's a ton of idiosyncrasies that you're looking for when you're going through these logs. We've traditionally used log analyzing services from things like Alien Vault and so forth, or Perch or something like that. And these really were kind of designed to do this type of work before LLMs came into play. With LLMs, you can dump tons and tons and tons of logs into them, let them train on those logs, give them good examples, give them bad examples, and they can help to automate this process significantly. However, LLMs are not infallible. They have hallucinations. They are only as good as the data that they have to analyze. And they may not be able to do this type of stuff in real time. So you're still doing a post-mortem analysis with them. The implications for the open source security and database reliability when it comes to things like this. SQLite is widely embedded across various applications from mobile apps to browsers. Big Sleep's ability to detect flaws in such a fundamental open source technology suggests that AI-driven tools could significantly bolster security for widely used open source components, because there's a lot of data to go over. This also speaks to the promise, but also the limitations of AI-driven security research. AI is huge. It's in the news. It's touching just about everything nowadays. AI is mostly being used for content generation, content creation, content transformation, using it in a manner in which you're trying to actually inject a human analytical element here is, I don't want to say risky, but it's a little bit more complicated, I think, than what these models were originally designed for. So it should be interesting to see how that evolves. And what is the role of AI in accelerating patch timelines and risk mitigation? We've talked in the past about AI being used to find, generate, or exploit vulnerabilities. Turning it around on the other side here to try to find the vulnerabilities is an interesting tactic itself, or to find active vulnerabilities happening at the same time. I think you need to be very careful with this. You have to watch out for the false flags. You have to watch out for garbage coming out that may either give you a false sense of security that you're not finding anything because the AI said there's nothing there. It doesn't mean there's nothing there. But it also runs the risk of generating too many false alarms that you just don't trust the system anymore at all. So it's kind of a double-edged sword that we have to worry about there. So that was all we had for news this week. We'll be right back, finishing up our discussion with Howard Dortch. We'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insights into things. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Technology. In our fourth part of our discussion with Howard Dorch, we finished with his insights on today's emerging technology, his views on the future of technology, and some helpful advice for those looking to break into the industry. So we've danced around the artificial intelligence, genie in the bottle here that's now out of the bottle. What do you think of ChatGPT and the various transformer models and LLMs out there? Where do you think are they the future of where we're going with computing and video games, or is this just another 3D fad that no one's going to bother with?
No, it's going to be an important part of the future. But like anything, it carries with it a certain amount of danger. The danger, the product in and of itself, if used for intent of entertainment, great stuff. But the product then being available for other nefarious purposes becomes a problem.
Right.
So I see it. And how do you put a rope around it? How do you say you can't go there? There's no throttle to it. There's no rope that you can put around it to stop it. But the AI, like I said, we had this technology some time ago, and we just didn't know how to take advantage of the processor power that it took to do it. Like ChatGPT, you want it to write a story for you. So take a look at what it really needs to do that. First of all, it needs a dictionary.
Right.
You need to have all the words, and you need to have an understanding of all the words. Now, if you wanted to write humor, then what it needs is a background of all the humor that was ever written anywhere ever. So those AIs need access to massive databases of all kinds in order to do what they need to do. You can limit it or you can unlimit it. And if you give it access to everything, and here we go, Terminator, Skynet.
Yeah.
Things come to mind. But in order to have a good AI, it has to have access to everything. Now, if you want to have a good art AI, you got to give it a picture of every piece of art in the world, and you have to classify it. Here's Van Gogh, here's Frank Frazetta, two different styles completely.
Right.
So, if you want something like what Frank Frazetta does, then the AI needs to understand here's every stroke that he made on all of his album covers and book covers.
Sure.
So now the thing has something to draw from. It can see what was, and what it would do is go out and say, well, I'm going to build a male character, and it's got to have muscles, and it's got to be long hair, and maybe a beard, maybe not a beard. It's got to make those kind of decisions. But basically, it's going to try to replicate the work that Frank Frazetta did. So databases, that's what makes the AI work.
Mm-hmm.
You cut off the databases, it can't think on its own. It has to have some frame of reference.
Right. Yeah, I heard someone told me an analogy before about AI. It's like if you have a parrot and you have an AI, and you ask the parrot and you ask the AI, if it wants a cracker, and they both say yes. Well, the parrot really wants the AI. The parrot really wants the cracker. The AI really doesn't care about the cracker. It's just emulating what a parrot would say.
Right.
And in playing around with it, prompt engineering and stuff like that, the closest analogy I had is today's AI is like a bread maker, right? I have to put the ingredients in. So I need to know what the ingredients are. I need to supply the ingredients. I need to put them in the right order, and I need to set the timer right. I put it all in, it churns it up, it cooks it for me, and at the end of the day, I have a loaf of bread. But that's all the AI does, is it cooks the bread for you. It doesn't make the bread for you.
Right.
And having worked in academia yourself, do you think that there's a danger, a brain drain danger of kids? Well, I'm not quite to the point where I think I've earned it, but I'll still call them kids anyway. Do you think the kids today who use AI to do their creative work for school projects, do you see that being a danger?
Absolutely.
How do you combat that? How would you combat something like that?
It makes them stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, the classes that I taught, I had a rule: show up. I'm going to give you homework every class. I'm going to give you homework. Show up, do your homework. I'll guarantee you get an A in my class.
Right.
Because the tests, the midterms, and the final exams were the homework.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that I had them do in the homework, I took questions from each one of them and put it in the midterm and the final exam. Show up, listen to the lecture, do the homework, take the test, you will pass. And I kind of forced it on them to get them to do research. And what did I find out? Copy and paste out of Google every time.
Right.
I mean, that they did their own AI. It's like it's like I want you to find out about legal issues in the game industry.
Yeah.
And so they went out and found some article in Google and copied and pasted, printed it out, and handed it in for their homework. Little did they know, I too have access to a computer and know how to use one.
Right.
So every class we would have that conversation, and I would get them in class. In order to bypass that, I'd get them in class and have them turn the computers off and make them do their homework right then.
Oh, that's just mean.
Well, how do you drive creativity out of them?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Well, and to a certain extent, there's a certain creativity required to get AI to do what you need it to do. Prompt engineering is a valid job. You can go out and get a job doing as a prompt engineer now, and it requires it's almost like a programming language, right? So, for instance, if you want to write a space opera, you want to write the newest Star Wars. You have to go out there and tell it what style you want to write it in. You have to feed it something to do something with. You can't just say, write me a story, because it's going to come back with nothing. So as long as you're able to provide the information that it needs into the prompt, you can get it to do stuff, and then you tweak those prompts. But the kids nowadays are basically feeding in questions from their homework assignments and getting whatever comes back, which is no better than a Google search, and pasting that into the homework.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
well, and a smart instructor, teacher, educator can see that. I mean, the educators have to be educated. They just have to know how to drive what they need for them to do.
Right.
Math problems. Like I said, turn the computer off. Sometimes you just got to turn it off, and have them actually think. So, but can AI do good things? Absolutely. Can AI cure cancer? Possibly. Well, what better use for it?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Than to do good.
If
I had all of the AI in the world, first thing I'd want to do is, how do I feed everybody in the world, and how do I cure disease?
Right. Well, and
Get to work.
AI is like any other tool. If you know how to use it and you know what it's used for, you can use it right. The problem is you take somebody who's not a carpenter and you put a hammer in their hand, everything's a nail to them, and they just want to use the hammer on everything. But if you know how to use the tool, you can wield that tool of AI in a way that is constructive overall for everybody, even yourself.
So should GPT be taught a class?
I think it should. I think it's something, if for no other reason, to teach about the pitfalls of ChatGPT. One of the things that we run into at my work right now is everyone and their brother wants to use AI. And the problem is they start asking questions of ChatGPT. And when you ask questions, you're putting information, you're exfiltrating information into it. And that information isn't just in your chat session. That information is ingested into the model itself, and everybody has access to it. So when you start putting proprietary information in there, that's a major security risk. So
Absolutely.
if you're going to teach ChatGPT, at a very minimum, you should teach what these pitfalls are and what these dangers are, and then teach them how to use it properly so that they can do it safely. It's like having a gun, right? I can give a 5-year-old a gun and he'll probably blow his brains out, unfortunately. Yep, there you go. Or I can teach you how to use a gun, and then you can use it constructively to hunt or defend yourself or what else. But you need to know what it does and how to use it and what it's used for.
Yeah, I agree. And, if I was teaching it, of course, I'm old school, being old. What I would do is have them create an AI engine. Class 1, how do you create an AI engine? How do you create a state machine?
Mm-hmm.
Get them to understand the basics of how AI works, and they can write, and they don't have to be computer programmers. They just have to understand the logic of how to lay out a state machine. And let's face it, AI is nothing more than a giant state machine. I need words out of the dictionary. Which one should I use? You ask me about flying jets. Let's go look up everything about jets and flying. And,
right.
I can feed you the information. So like you say, seeding the AI with a question, it preloads it and it knows where you're going with it.
Exactly.
Make me an article about what? You have to preload it.
Yeah.
So yeah, can it be good? Yes. Can it be bad? Skynet. It makes my brain sweat.
There's been enough movies about how it can be bad that we don't need to go into that.
There's all kinds of bad. iRobot, it comes to mind.
Yep.
Yeah, where are we going to go with it? I don't know.
Well, Howard, I want to thank you. This has been, as I expected, entertaining and educational discussion for me.
Well, thank you. One thing I would like to ask you.
Absolutely.
Don't refer to me as an expert of any kind. I just happen to be in these positions at these times. I am no miracle worker, no expert. I just know what I have done, know what I've been involved with, and I'm not that great. I was just there, and I did the work, and I knew what was going on.
Well, you are, if nothing
don't put
else,
me too high on the pedestal.
You are modest, if nothing else. But I won't refer to you as an expert. You're more of a sage to me.
Okay.
You're like a wizened sage to me with you're the only person I know people come to you and say, hey, can you come work for me? Every job I ever had, I had to go find. So I've not been lucky enough for people to come to me and ask me to come work for them.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately has been my downfall. People just, you got to come here and work. Okay. Yeah, I guess. Do you pay money?
Yeah. Rough life.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of feel like Forrest Gump every now and then. It's like I just happen to be at the right place at the right time, and boom, here's magic. So
Hey, you know what? I'd rather be lucky than good any day.
fair enough.
So,
Fair enough.
all right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up the discussion here. I appreciate your time, and maybe we'll have you on again for the latest and greatest news in the technology world that we can talk about some other time. That was all we had for this week. Before we do go, I want to take a moment once again to invite you to subscribe to the podcast. You can find all of our episodes, both video and audio, listed as Insights into Things. And you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, pretty much any place you can get a podcast these days. I would also encourage you to give us your feedback. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can call us and leave a voicemail for us at 856-403-8788. That's 856-403-8788. If you'd like to get on the podcast with us, just let us know in your voicemail and we can make that happen. We may edit the podcast, your voicemail for the podcast itself to fit into a lot of time that we have. Again, it's 856-403-8788. You can also find high-res videos of all of our episodes on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings. We do stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. If you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you do get a free monthly Twitch Prime subscription. We'd appreciate it if you threw that our way. It helps us keep the lights on around here. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothings podcasts, or you can find links to all that and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. That's it. Another one in the books.